Hello and welcome. Today we are dissecting one of the most famous and most misunderstood corporate case studies in modern business history, the decline and resurgence now of Eastman Kodak. Our insights, based on the publication with SLOAN Management Review at MIT, draws heavily from the profound analysis of Professor Willy Shih, a Harvard professor and former senior VP at Kodak who ran their digital division. His first-hand experience shatters the myths we've all been told. We all think we know the story. It goes something like this. Kodak, the undisputed king of film photography, was so blinded by its own success that it completely missed the digital revolution happening right under its nose. But there's a significant problem with that version of events. It's perhaps entirely wrong. Kodak didn't just see the digital revolution coming, they actually invented the first digital camera way back in 1975. According to Professor Shih, senior leadership was acutely aware of the approaching storm. They tracked the digital takeover meticulously. So if they knew it was coming, why did they still fall? The real lessons from Kodak's decline are far more complicated, and they serve as a powerful warning for today's organizations. To understand the fall, we first have to understand the empire. Manufacturing color film wasn't just a business. It was high-stakes alchemy. Kodak coated wide rolls of plastic with 24 distinct layers of complex chemicals in pitch black conditions. It was so incredibly difficult that they only had two real competitors on the entire planet. Kodak had built an impenetrable fortress. Then came digital. Digital imaging didn't care about complex chemistry. It was built on a general-purpose semiconductor platform. Suddenly, the fortress walls vanished. Digital technology is modular. Think of it like building blocks. Good engineer could buy off-the-shelf parts and put together a camera. The barriers to entry dropped to zero. It wasn't just Kodak feeling the pain. Even consumer electronics giants saw their dominant products turned into commoditized plug-and-play digital displays. When technology becomes modular, century-old monopolies can be wiped out overnight by startups appearing out of nowhere. While the technology shifted, Kodak faced a second agonizing challenge: the economics of scaling down. Every business school teaches you how to scale up. As you make more products, they get cheaper to produce. But scaling down is a nightmare. As consumers slowly switching to digital, film sales shrank. But Kodak's massive factory still had their fixed costs. When you shrink the size of production run, your unit costs skyrocket. If Kodak raised the price of film to cover these costs, they would drive even more people to digital, creating a literal death spiral. You simply cannot slash fixed costs fast enough to outrun a dying medium. But Kodak's problems extend beyond the factory floor. They suffered an ecosystem collapse. For decades, retail stores adored Kodak. Why? Because film was a foot traffic machine. You went to the store to buy the film, you went back to drop it off, you went back a third time to pick up your prints. Retailers made a fortune on photo finishing, and customers bought ancillary items on every single visit. Retailers loved it. Digital wiped that out entirely. There was no longer a reason for retailers to push Kodak products. The golden era of photo printing ecosystem vanished. and Kodak lost its strongest retail allies in the blink of an eye. Compounding this was a fierce internal organizational conflict and wars. Critics love to claim that Kodak's management killed digital to protect film. But Professor Shih points out a forgotten truth. Kodak actually spun up a completely separate digital division and it worked. They captured a leading market share in digital cameras for a brief time, right up until smartphones decimated the standalone camera market. The real internal killer was the survival instinct of the legacy business. Thousands of employees knew their jobs were tied to a dying technology. Naturally, legacy managers fought for control, demanding resources and access to new channels, fueling massive internal strife. Trying to manage the emotional and financial weight of a shrinking empire while birthing a new one proved impossible. With the benefit of hindsight, what could Kodak have done differently? Professor Shih outlines a few strategic alternatives. First, they could have copied Fujifilm. Fuji stopped focusing on the market of photography and focused instead on their capability, complex chemistry, successfully pivoting into cosmetics and medical imaging. But for Kodak, this meant walking away from one of the most famous consumer brands in history. Second, they could have held on to Eastman Chemical, a highly successful industrial division they spun off in 1994. Or third, they could have proactively exited their legacy business, much like what IBM did when they ruthlessly sold off their personal computer and hard drive divisions to shed legacy costs. But to execute that strategy, an organization needs a pipeline of brilliant new innovations ready to launch. Kodak simply didn't have them. Kodak isn't a story of foolish executives who can see the future. It's a terrifying lesson in the physics of business. For any leader managing a company today, this case study leaves us with three sobering questions to ask ourselves. First, is your core technology converging to the point of becoming a general-purpose modular platform? If it is, preparing for your margins to plummet is a good starting point. Second, are you sitting on massive capital-intensive legacy assets that will be impossible to scale down efficiently? And finally, as technology shifts, how will the balance of power in your ecosystem change? Will your partners eventually abandon you? Kodak saw the future, but the seeing storm doesn't mean you have the agility, the organizational alignment, or the economic flexibility to outrun it. But the story of Kodak didn't end in the ashes of the digital revolution. Today in 2026, the iconic yellow brand represents one of the most fascinating reinventions in modern business. No longer trying to be the mass market consumer behemoth of the 20th century, Kodak has successfully refocused as a lean, specialized innovator. They've taken their unparalleled legacy in complex chemistry and applied it to the future, becoming a vital player in advanced materials, commercial printing, and even electric vehicle battery technology. And in a beautiful, poetic twist of irony, they're experiencing a massive, profitable resurgence in the original craft, driven by a new generation of creators, directors, and photographers craving tangible, authentic art. Kodak's analog film factories are roaring back to life to meet soaring global demand. They didn't outrun the digital platform or the storm, but by returning to their roots and leveraging their deepest capabilities, Kodak weathered it. Today, they stand not just as a survivor, but as a quiet, reinvigorated master of their domain. Thank you for watching.